How's everybody doing today? I thought I would do a short space today and address the video that everybody probably saw yesterday of the woman in red claiming that she's not a Tate victim. We're going to get into that a little bit later because, as usual, there's so much misinformation that gets shared around with this sort of thing. So I just want to talk a little bit about that, sex trafficking, how it relates to the Tate case, and kind of get into the weeds a little bit and explain things at a little deeper level on this so people can get a better understanding. But first, I just want to go over what the brothers have been charged with for the second case. There's a first case as well. The first case, Andrew's been charged with forming an organized criminal group. He's been charged with human trafficking in continued form with 4 victims and rape in continued form. Tristan Tate has been charged with forming an organized criminal group, human trafficking in continued form with 3 victims, and instigation to assault another. He allegedly gave instructions to Georgiana and they wanted to physically assault one of their victims, and Georgiana took him up on the offer. So he has this additional charge of incitement. The second case is significantly larger. There's charges of forming an organized criminal group, additional human trafficking. There's a total of 34 women part of the second human trafficking case so far. And it looks like there's up to 12 more victims that might get added to the case. They're currently investigating this right now. Andrew has an additional charge of trafficking in minors for allegedly trafficking a 17-year-old girl and forcing her to work on webcam. They have confirmed her date of birth, and she was 17 years old in 2014 when they created her OnlyFans account. And from 2014 up to 2021, they say that she made $1.5 million for Andrew, which he took all for himself. He's also being charged with sexual intercourse with a minor who was a 15 years old victim at the time. Now, you have to call this for what it is. A minor cannot give consent. So if you are having sex with a minor who cannot give consent, that is rape. So that is rape of a minor, 15 years old. It was anal rape and oral rape multiple times, according to DCOT, and according to the victim, and according to WhatsApp messages, and according to a witness, and according to a wiretap as well. There's also a money laundering charge, and there's some confusion around the money laundering charge. There's It's money laundering in continued form, which means basically with any of these charges where you've heard me say in continued form, it means that it happened over a period of time and happened more than once. Money laundering, there's a larger money laundering offense, but there's an additional money laundering incident that happened in 2024 when the Tates allegedly purchased 4 supercars under their friends and I believe their security guard's name. The prosecutors alleging that they were trying to launder money that way, and they were trying to use that as one reason to violate the brothers' current preventive measures, which is judicial control, which is kind of similar to bail. By violating their judicial control, it could be a reason to get them put back into jail or put them under house arrest. However, the judge said at that time, because they were trying to restrict those measures, the judge said that that was not a justifying ground and they had not seen enough evidence for that particular incident of money laundering. That doesn't mean that the larger money laundering offense doesn't exist. It does. They're being prosecuted for money laundering at a much larger scale. There's also a charge for both brothers for influencing statements. This is essentially witness tampering. They're alleging, and this is just for the second case so far, and we have a little bit of information on the first case as well that's going to get merged into this. So for this particular second case, Andrew has, there's 3 people that they allege Andrew was influencing. One of them was the 15-year-old girl. He offered her allegedly 5,000 euros to lie to DCOT on his behalf, but he only paid her half of that money and he purchased a new phone for her to take to DCOT. So if they were to extract the data from her phone, they would not get all of the actual information. But per usual, DCOT is 1,000 steps ahead of these guys. They actually have the WhatsApp messages between Andrew and the 15-year-old girl that confirm that he tried to bribe her. They also have wiretaps where it confirms of her rape, essentially, and there's a witness, according to DCOT. He's in a lot of trouble for that. And by the way, if you have questions, we're going to bring people up This is not going to be a long space, so if a couple people want to come up and speak along the way, just raise your hand and I'll bring you up in the order that I see them. Okay, so that brings us up to speed with what the charges are for both cases. The UK has also requested and they were granted extradition. So whenever Romania is finished with the Tate brothers, if that means that they're somehow acquitted of all charges, they will immediately be arrested and extradited to the UK. If they are convicted and sentenced to prison, whenever their prison sentence ends, they get arrested and extradited to the UK. That is a criminal case in the UK for additional human trafficking and rape. Okay, now let's talk about the video. Give me a thumbs up or just give me some emoji. I want to see how many people saw the video of the woman come out in front of the courthouse and say that she was not a victim of the Tate brothers. I'm just curious. I'm scrolling through. I'm going to see how many people actually saw that video. She was a short-haired woman wearing a red jacket. She said she came out and she said that she's not a victim of the Tate brothers, that they've treated her kindly and fairly, and she thinks that Decot is after money, and the whole thing is a sham, essentially. And it's her right to say that. And we'll get into why this is her right a little bit later. But the first thing I noticed about it, I think this entire video was manipulated, it was orchestrated and put together because we've seen them do similar things in the past. We saw from Andrew's recorded jail calls when he was originally in jail in January of 2023. He was calling his assistant and calling Luke, his cousin, and giving instructions to get women and other people to make videos on his behalf to say he's innocent, that Decot is corrupt, and Decot was trying to pressure people into saying that they're victims, etc. So they've already been caught doing this sort of thing. But the weird thing that really stuck out to me on this one is they said that all of the victims were in court today and none of the victims wanted to be there. They were angry that they were there. However, there were no victims shown inside the courthouse. And the brothers film inside the courthouse all the time. And the same journalist, one of the remaining journalists, he's always inside of the courthouse as well. So they're always inside of the courthouse being filmed. They're always filmed coming out of the courthouse. But this particular bring Jan up. This particular victim was out way in front of the courthouse, and she came walking out of a side area where trees were. There were no sidewalks in that direct path. So it was a really unusual path for her coming in. And as she walked up, as luck would have it, Tate's cameraman, his name is Bailey, asked her in perfect English, as Bailey speaks, ask her, "Are you Tate's human trafficking victim?" And then she came in and she started speaking a little bit in English. And the Romanian reporter, the press started asking her some questions. So the whole thing looked staged. They didn't get her coming out of the courthouse. They didn't film any of the women inside of the courthouse. But it is her right to say that. She can say whatever she wants. The thing is this, because a lot of people say, well, if she's saying she's not a victim, or if those first two women in the first case who came out and said that they're not victims, if they're stating that they're not victims, how is it possible that they're still victims? Isn't that corruption? How can you not believe the women? So the way human trafficking prosecution works is law enforcement who prosecutes human traffickers and they handle victims, they are aware that many times victims will protect their abusers for various reasons. Sometimes they're paid to lie. Sometimes they're being blackmailed. Sometimes they're being threatened. Sometimes the women are in love with their attackers, right? They've been misled into this relationship. Sometimes they don't even believe or they don't even know that they're victims. They don't understand the circumstances that they've been in for various reasons. So for this woman to come forward and say that she's not a victim, that's fine. All of these women can come forward and say they're not victims if they want to, but they're considered victims because the authorities have collected credible evidence that shows that they were trafficked and they were exploited. Because law enforcement that deals with human trafficking, because they're used to this sort of thing, they're used to victims not fully cooperating with them, it forces the authorities to find additional evidence in case the victims do not cooperate. And that evidence can come in the form, like in this case, we know that tons of the evidence comes directly off of the Tate brothers' devices, their computers, their phones. It can come through all sorts of different methods. It can come through audio messages. It can come through various, financial transactions where they can put the chain together where the girl gets paid, and they look at chat messages where they talk about how maybe the girl was exploited, how they may have implemented control mechanisms for her. So they're looking to find all this different information, or the different uh, evidence on each victim, in case the victim chooses not to participate. And this leads me to the next point. One of the things that she said, and the other two victims from the first case said, they said that Decot was trying to force them to say that they're victims. They're forcing us to claim that we're victims. They're forcing us to sign papers. They're forcing us to do all of this stuff. That's not true. That's not how human trafficking victims are treated. Romania signed on to the UN Protocol for Human Trafficking, which is an international treaty. Over 180 countries have signed on to this treaty, and it very specifically, and I put a link, if you go up to the nest up top, um, there's a chart, but scroll over from that, and there's a chart, and I've got a screenshot of Section 2, Article 6, which is the assistance and protection of victims of trafficking in persons. This is part of that protocol, and there's a very detailed instructions on how victims are protected, how they're handled, and they're not forced to declare themselves as victims because they don't actually have to participate. If they don't want to participate, they don't have to participate. It can help the prosecutor, or the prosecutor, it can help his case for sure. It can strengthen the case if they do participate. But if they don't, that's also okay because they've already found additional evidence to show that they were trafficked and they were exploited. So for her to come out and say she's being forced, that's another thing that makes me believe that it was orchestrated, because they don't force people to claim victims because they don't have to. If every victim in the case came out and said, we don't want to be victims, the Tate brothers are still being prosecuted for every single one of them because DCOT has found credible evidence to show that they were trafficked and they were exploited. In the first case, there's 7 victims. DCOT identified 7 victims. 2 of those victims claim that they're not victims, but the Tate brothers are still being prosecuted for them. Now, out of those 7 victims, 5 of those victims gave statements against the brothers. And out of those 5, 4 of those victims are moving forward to the trial as what's called an injured party. An injured party is a victim classification, specifically in Romania, that it's a victim classification, which means that the victim acknowledges that harm has been done to them. They acknowledge some sort of harm, some sort of damage has been done to me. And once they classify themselves as a injured party, it allows them to, number one, be part of the trial, be part of the case, have access to all of the case information, all of the files. It also allows them to seek compensation if they choose. They can also testify against the brothers in trial if they want. Again, these are options. These are not things that are mandatory, which moves along to another thing. The Tate brothers said that the victims were there supporting them in their day in court. This is also false. So victims, or let me back up for a second. The Tate brothers were in court for 2 reasons on that particular day. They were there for an asset hearing to see what was going to happen with their assets, the new assets that were seized, and they were there to get a decision on the preventive measures, what's going to happen over the next 30 days, like Andrew's house arrest. Victims do not attend preventive measure hearings, so they're not there to figure out what's going on with house arrest or judicial control or any of that. Victims don't attend that. And the only victims that attend an asset hearing are injured party victims who are going to be seeking compensation. And the reason they are part of those hearings is because the assets can be sold to compensate those victims. So when the brothers come out and say that the victims were at court and they were angry and all of that, they were not there for that. They were not there for either one of those hearings. You can use the internet, it's free. You can look this stuff up yourself. All of this is a big propaganda push to try to make the brothers look like they're the victims. So the woman coming out in the red, it was clearly orchestrated. If she would have come out of the courthouse and they got her walking out of the courthouse, or they filmed her in the courthouse like the Tate brothers are always filming, and then she walked out and she just said, I'm frustrated. They've listed me as a victim. I don't want to be a victim. The brothers have been nice to me. I would believe that. I would believe that. I don't know what her circumstances are, but I would believe that. But as soon as she started saying she was being forced to sign things or she was being forced to say she was a victim, that's how I knew. Beside the fact that she walked out of the trees and was asked by Andrew's cameraman, his own cameraman, if she was a victim. Besides that, the fact that she said that she was being forced, that was the red flag that let me know that was orchestrated. They don't force victims to do anything. They tell them what their rights are, what their options are. They offer them counseling and information. They can explain to them what human trafficking is. They offer them medical support. They offer them psychological assistance. These are all things that Romania has agreed to with the UN protocol. So just as you see more and more of these videos coming out, the thing to think about here is, and of course, if they're listening to this, they're probably going to adjust. They're going to adjust their tactics because I'm on to you. Yeah, if they're coming forward and just say, "Hey, we don't feel like we're victims, but they've added us to the file," that's fine. But if they're coming out and they're saying they're forcing us to do this, they're forcing us to do that, that's clearly orchestrated. And we saw this before with Andrew's recorded jail calls. Now I'm going to catch my breath for a moment. Jan, how you doing, man? Welcome back.
Hello, hello. Thank you.
Hey,
So,
man.
I'm doing good. Thank you. How are you?
Great, great, great.
Sweet. So, the other day I was in a space with Will Pujols, and
Okay.
I asked him like, "Hey, what question should I bring into one of the spaces of the other side? Because I try to like get the best view from both sides." And he asked me to ask the following question to you, which is,
To ask me the question.
yeah, basically, he
Okay.
said, "Do you believe the American victim is a credible victim, or should be believed? Like, basically, is she credible?"
You're asking me if the American victim in the first case is a credible witness, a credible victim, credible witness.
Yeah, he basically asked the others if they think she's credible.
Oh, I think I understand what you're saying. As in, like putting her on the stand to testify or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's absolutely a credible witness. So, will Pujols ask you that?
Yes, in the others, but well, I asked him, right, because I like, unfortunately we don't have too much dialogue going on between the two sides. But I was like, okay, if I could bring a question to the other space, what should I ask? What is something that would clearly prove the other side, right? And I'm saying other side in the sense that other from your side, right?
Okay, yeah. So all of the victims and all of the cases are credible witnesses, even the American victim. And the reason why, well, first of all, I just want to state that even asking that question, is she a credible witness, shows his complete lack of understanding of how human trafficking cases are prosecuted. So a victim's credibility in all of these cases for human trafficking, it's not being judged on their past. And I believe where he's going with this is because they love to say that she has a troubled past and she's accused guys of the past or accused guys in her past of doing things when she was 15, 16, 17 years old. So I can see where it comes from of saying that she's not credible. But a victim's credibility isn't judged on their past and things that they did when they were in another country or before. It's judged on the testimony and the evidence that's provided in this particular case. So they're not looking back at the things she did uh, in another country or things she did outside of this case. They're looking to see what does she say that's credible to this particular case, and is there any corroborating evidence to support what she's saying? Now, DCOT will have collected corroborating evidence to match her statements for this case, and that's what they're going to look at. If she does go on the stand, and I believe she originally she was not considered an injured party, and her statement to DCOT originally in the first document says that she wanted to be left alone. She did not want to be involved in the case. She just wanted to be left alone. But since they started harassing her and they sued her in the U.S., she was since added as a injured party, as it's her right to do so. So they're gonna, if she goes in the stand, first of all, it's not going to be like on TV where she goes in and she sits in a box. They're going to Zoom in or Skype in or something like that if they're not in Romania. They're allowed to do that, and they're going to get her statement. They might cross-examine her, and well, of course, they're going to cross-examine her, and they're going to look at the evidence that DCOT has collected to see if it corroborates her statement. They're not looking to see what happened to her in her past when she was a minor or anything she did in another country. That doesn't happen. That's not how human trafficking cases are prosecuted. And to give this more perspective, so and Will's got a bizarre mind how he thinks about this stuff. So for him to say she's not credible because of her past accusations, for him to say that, or for anybody to say that, then that means he also has to say that Andrew Tate is not a credible witness because of all of his past accusations. He's been accused of rape multiple times. He's been accused of drug trafficking. He's been accused of murder. There's tons of accusations against Andrew Tate as well. So to say that the American victim isn't credible because of her past accusations, then you also have to say Andrew Tate is not credible because of his accusations against him. However, that's not how it plays out. Andrew will also be a credible witness. He's going to be judged on what he says during the case, and that's going to be corroborated with whatever evidence is brought up against him. Does
Got
that?
it. But it does answer the question, but let me just try and represent Will's argument as honestly as I can, because I think if I understand him correctly, then the American witness was also sued or something by the Tates for defamation, and she lost that case, so she doesn't get to talk. Like, it was basically proven that she was lying.
No. Okay, so the brothers are suing her in the United States in a civil lawsuit for defamation. They tried to prosecute her in Romania for the same thing, and the judge threw it out. So they sued her and the Moldovan victim in the United States. The Moldovan victim does not live in the United States. She doesn't go there. She doesn't travel there. She doesn't work there. They put her in the lawsuit, and then Tate's U.S. lawyer put the document unredacted in his timeline and doxed all of their information. Both of the victims doxed their home address, their ID numbers, their phone numbers, all of it. Doxed all their information. So and they also sued the American victim's parents. They also sued the U.S. Marine who called the U.S. Embassy, who was concerned for her safety. Everyone was removed from the case and dismissed except for the American victim. And the U.S. Marine, he was dismissed with prejudice, which means that they cannot try to sue him again. So if you dismiss something with prejudice, that means it's done. You can't bring that up again. If you dismiss something without prejudice, you can come back with a new motion and try to find a different angle to sue somebody else that's previously involved. So the Marine was essentially doing his job. He was reporting what he believed was a crime, and he could not be prosecuted for doing his job. So he was dismissed as prejudice. Now, all of the complaints except for three were also dismissed. And the three complaints that were not dismissed, the judge allowed them to move to discovery. That means that both sides are now going to share evidence to see what they come up with. And for a U.S. civil case, all they have to do to move to the discovery process is Tate's team has to show enough allegations, has to show enough information for a judge to say that maybe this happened. This may have happened based on the information that you've given me. Therefore, we're allowed to move to the next stage of discovery. So these three claims are now moving to discovery, where they're going to look at both sides of the evidence. And for the first time, the U.S. judge gets to read through the Romanian indictment, which was accepted into the U.S. case. Because when they filed this case, and up until recently, until the indictment was accepted, the U.S. judge had no knowledge of what was happening in Romania. And the Tates sold this entire thing to the U.S. judge that there are two victims in Romania, and they falsely accused the brothers, and it ruined their life. It caused all of this headache, all of these millions of lost dollars, and it's all because of these two victims. That's what the U.S. judge thinks. So when the U.S. judge actually reads through the Romanian indictment and sees that there's actually seven victims, and five of them have given statements against them, I can't imagine this is going to go well for them. But we'll see. But we'll see. I mean, your lawyers are sneaky. So one of the things the Tate brothers did when the judge approved them to move to discovery, the Tate brothers, their entire team, ran with this false narrative and said the judge determined that the two girls were lying, essentially that the two girls had framed them. And that's not true. All the judge did was acknowledge Tate's accusations and allowed the case to move to discovery for three claims. Because of this, the victim's attorney filed for a gag order and received a partial gag order, which means that the Tate brothers can no longer make any statements online that could intimidate the victim or put her in a position to where she doesn't want to testify or be involved in the case. So they received a partial gag order because they went out there and they lied. Because when they spread the lie and they said that she was lying, she started getting threats again. People online were talking about hunting her down in Florida, trying to track her down and all of that, which is threatening, right? If you're a human trafficking victim and now you've got the internet turning on you because your alleged traffickers are telling people that you just got caught lying, which wasn't true. So it put her in harm's way. So they did receive a partial gag order about that. So the Romanian prosecutor, Reda Stan, who built the first Romanian case, he has already stated that the US defamation case has no impact on the Romanian criminal case. So whatever happens in the US defamation case, it's not going to impact the Romanian criminal case in any capacity. The prosecutor has already confirmed this. Two different jurisdictions, different accusations, civil case in one country, criminal case for human trafficking in another country. It has no impact whatsoever. I see a lot of things popping up, and I think it's just misinformation that they like to spread, um, because that's what they do. They say that if the Tates win the defamation case, it's going to exonerate them, and the Romanian case is going to fall apart. And that's simply not true. That's not how it works. Even by some freak chance, the Tate brothers win their defamation case in the US, it has no impact on the Romanian case whatsoever. It's already been confirmed.
Got it.
And
So
I
to
that was a
summarize,
long answer. That was a long answer, but this is a complicated, confusing, multiple cases. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, I just want to summarize it so that when I join the next space from Will, I can represent the answer that you gave me somewhat well. So basically, the Tates sued the American victim and the Moldovan in a US court for defamation, and the judge has moved that to discovery. But discovery just means they're now looking into it, and it could still get thrown out.
Right, right. Yeah, because up to this point, for a civil case to move to discovery, the judge hasn't actually been looking at hard evidence yet. The judge is just looking at Tate's accusations, right? Is Tate or his legal team, have they provided enough accusations? Have they shown me enough that warrants moving to the next stage where evidence can actually be dissected? Actually be looked at by both parties. And that's the next stage that we're moving into. There's been no ruling. It hasn't moved to trial yet. It's only moving to the discovery phase where they're going to start looking at the evidence and where the judge for the first time is actually going to read the Romanian indictment to see what actually happened in Romania. And I can't imagine that's going to play out uh, good for the Tates once the judge realizes that they haven't been told the full story.
Got it. Thank you.
And back to your question of is she a credible witness? Um, yeah, she is going to be credible in this case. Tate is going to be credible in this case. You know, their credibility is going to be based on the evidence presented and what they say during this case, not things that happened to them previously. Now, if there were a situation where, let's say, Tate had a previous conviction for human trafficking, that could be taken, well, that would be taken into consideration when it came time to sentencing if he were to be convicted, because then it would show a pattern of criminality. But that's not the case here. So they're going to be looking at, what Tate has to say and what each individual victim has to say, based on what they say during that particular case and based on the evidence that DCOT presents to corroborate their statements. But yeah, that's just a wild thing to think that she's not a credible witness because she has a troubled past. So, okay, so I'm trying to think how I can articulate this. Human traffickers often target vulnerable women. That's what they do. They don't want an easy target. They don't want somebody who's going to give them pushback. They don't want somebody who's going to make it difficult to control or difficult for them to control. They're looking for vulnerable women, women who have troubled past, women uh, who have been through things, trauma, essentially. So the fact that she does have a troubled past. So when you ask, is she a credible witness? Not only is she a credible witness, but the fact that she has a troubled past shows that she's vulnerable. And that can be used to the prosecutor's advantage. So things that she may have said in the past won't harm her, but the fact that she's vulnerable and the fact that she was raped when she was 15, 16, 17 years old by groups of adults. One of them was 56 years old, I believe, raping her as a 15-year-old child. That sort of thing shows that she's vulnerable, and the prosecutor can lean on that to actually show that they were taking advantage of her vulnerability. Because when they prosecute trafficking cases, that's one of the things that they do is they try to see, okay, is this victim, was she vulnerable? How was she vulnerable? And in the new document we see when they're giving us a summary of each of the victims, they talk about things about having psychological trauma, anxiety, depression, loss of a parent, that sort of thing. So they're specifically looking for um, victims who have troubled past, victims who have gone through trauma. It makes them easier to control. So that's going to actually play in the prosecutor's favor if they can show that she um, does have these vulnerabilities. So not only is Will wrong, it's actually going to be her past, her troubled past, is actually going to help the prosecutor. It's not going to be held against her. It's going to help the prosecutor. Here's another thing to understand: victims of trafficking are not on trial. They can give their statements, they can give their testimony, they can participate if they want to participate, but they're not the ones on trial. The Tate brothers are on trial. The victims are just there to um, give their statement and let the judge know what happened to them. And of course, Tate's legal team will cross-examine them, um, and then DCOT's going to show the corroborating evidence that they have to support the victim's statement and to show why she was added as a victim to the case. Really long-winded answer, but does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to point him to this space for your full answer, but I'm gonna represent you as good as I can on his next space, and I'm curious to see what he has to say about this.
Yeah, I've been sent some clips and stuff, things that he said, and I I I, I want to think he means well, but saying things like the U.S. case is going to make the Romanian case crumble, it just shows that he doesn't understand what's actually happening and how jurisdiction works and how trafficking cases are being prosecuted. And saying things like she's not a credible witness because she's a vulnerable person, like that's so backwards. Like that's going to play in her favor, not be something that actually hurts her when she goes to give her statement. Even if the Tate brothers somehow win their defamation suit, that's still not going to impact what she says in Romania. Zero impact. That's not even going to be brought up in Romania. Has nothing to do with that case. Those are two totally separate things. And I know that's hard for people to wrap their head around, but you could probably spend 5 minutes on the internet and figure that out yourself. Where I'm trying to think where I left off before you asked that question. Oh, we were talking about the victims. Trying to
I
think
think you
where
were
we left.
talking still about the victim that came forward and spoke for the Tates.
Okay, yeah, we're talking about the woman who came out. I think I mentioned how the victims have rights; they're not being forced. If the victims do get called into DCOT, thank you. If the victims do get called into VCOT, they're not being called in and being forced to sign anything, or they're not being forced to say that they're victims. They're being brought in so DCOT can explain the situation to them, offer them counseling, offer them information, let them know what their legal rights are, let them know they can participate as an injured party if they want, let them know that they can seek compensation if they want, they can testify on behalf of the prosecution if they want, they can offer them medical and psychological assistance. So these are the things that DCOT are doing. I mean, DCOT is an organization that prosecutes, they investigate and they prosecute, drug trafficking, organized crime, terrorism, and human trafficking. This is what they do. This is what they do for their job. So they know how to handle victims of human trafficking. Romania, unfortunately, has a serious problem um, with human trafficking. So to the point, and I don't know if I covered this before, but why can't victims just remove themselves from the case? And stop me if I went through this, or maybe I'll go through it anyway because a bunch more people showed up. Victims can't remove themselves from the case because the authorities have found evidence that they were trafficked and they were exploited. And they don't know if that victim is coming forward because she was paid to come forward, because she's been threatened to come forward, because she's been blackmailed, or because she's in love with the trafficker, or she doesn't realize that she's been trafficked. But they're used to dealing with victims who do not want to participate. That's why they find additional information before they add them to the file. Now, we also know that there were two victims in the first case who Tate got caught on recorded calls to Luke, his cousin, and to his assistant, where they were trying to intimidate and threaten him to withdraw their statements from DCOT. They got caught with that, and that's part of the influencing statements charge. So there's a total of 4 people in the second case for influencing statements, and it looks like there's going to be 2 of them from the first case that will be added on. And I believe one of those people in the second case, I think 3 of them are victims, and I think one of them is a man. And I don't have any additional information on on the man other than it looks like Tate somehow influenced him to give false statements. I don't know how, but we do know that one of the victims, a 15-year-old, she was bribed by Tate to lie to DCOT. We also know that there's 2 other victims in the first case, the 2 women who said they're not victims. They were transported by Tate to Dubai after they gave their statements, which DCOT said were false statements. They transported them to Dubai, and the prosecutor says that they remain there today under Tate's control. One of them has a huge Tate-owned tattoo down her arm, and the other one has a Tate girl tattoo on her body. Those are the 2 victims who said they're not victims. But if you read through the actual files, DCOT has evidence that they were blackmailed and they were threatened with violence to actually make pornography. So they are absolutely victims. Absolutely victims. And let's move on to the next question that people ask a lot is, well, why don't we know the victims' names? You don't know the victims' names because you don't have to know the victims' names. You're not supposed to know the human trafficking victim's name. If you go to the nest up at the top where I've got the trafficking protocol linked, part of that protection that Romania signed on to, that 180 countries have signed on to, it means that the victims, each state, which is essentially each country, it says uh, each state party shall protect the privacy and identity of victims of trafficking in persons, including their aliases, by making legal proceedings relating to such trafficking confidential. So by default, human trafficking victims are protected, their privacies are protected. If they want to come forward, if they choose to come forward and say, hey, I'm a trafficking victim and I want to come forward and let everybody know that I've been trafficked or I haven't been trafficked. I believe these guys are innocent. If they choose to do that, they can do that. But by default, they are protected. Their privacy is protected. So the question then comes up, uh, why aren't victims coming forward? I saw some tweets back and forth. They say the woman in red that made the video yesterday, they said, well, this victim came forward and said that she's not a victim. Where are the victims that are saying they are victims? Again, there's no benefit at this particular stage for any of the victims to come forward and say, I'm a victim. There's no benefit to that whatsoever at this particular stage. They haven't been to trial yet. There hasn't been a conviction yet. There's no benefit whatsoever. I mean, look at what they've done to the American victim. She's in hiding because people went to her house. Her home address was doxed and people went to her house. She's in hiding. So there's no benefit whatsoever for anyone to come forward against the brothers publicly at this stage. What I think is going to happen after the trial concludes, if there is a conviction, I think you will see some women coming forward. Who knows? Maybe they'll be in documentaries, maybe they'll have book deals. I don't know how this is going to play out, but it's not in their benefit to come forward at this time. It's not necessary. They don't have to. There's nothing to gain. And if you're thinking, well, they could be paid to do interviews or they could get paid to do book deals, well, no, not really. Because if they came out now and people found out that they were getting paid to do certain things, they're getting paid to do interviews, or they're getting paid for book deals, or they're getting paid to participate in documentaries, people are going to say, oh, she's just after money. She's just after money. She's not a victim. Look, she's after money. Right. So they can't do it for that reason. And also, if they're an injured party and they are seeking compensation in the trial, that could technically be held against them. So if they're getting, let's just say, a book deal or something before the trial, they're trying to seek compensation as an injured party, it might be argued that they've already been compensated. They've already been compensated by whatever way they've made money outside of the case. Therefore, they shouldn't be entitled to additional compensation. So it just doesn't make sense for anyone to come forward at this time. After this is over, maybe some of them will. But victims don't come forward for many reasons. A lot of them just don't want the hassle. A lot of them see what happens to other victims. A lot of them want to move on with their life. A lot of them don't want to be re-traumatized. Or maybe they feel ashamed of what happened to them, or they're just embarrassed, or they just don't want the headache. A lot of them are living in Romania still, and the Tate brothers are unfortunately still at large in Romania. I would think if I were a Romanian victim, the last thing I would do right now for any amount of money is to come forward against the Tate brothers in Romania, where their brothers and their entire entourage um, are still at large. Hey, thoughts? How you doing?
Hey, I just because you guys are talking about like why aren't the victims public and stuff, if you just parallel to the Epstein Maxwell stuff, some of the victims decided that it was important enough to use their real names. Does anybody remember who they are? Other than Virginia Giuffre? Other than the
No,
primary victim in the Tate case, right? It's going to be the
right.
same principle. Is some victims will choose to stay private because it even one of the victims for Epstein that gave her name moved on with her life, and once she went through the trial as an adult, she was re-traumatized and she ended up taking her own life. So it's very serious for these victims to, even after they disclose their names, none of them are rich or famous, even Virginia Giuffre. Just keep that in mind. Thanks.
You're spot on. There's really no benefit, especially at this stage, other than harassment and public ridicule. Tate has an entire army that's already harassed one of the victims. People went to her house. I mean, just think about this from a victim's perspective. If you know that internet trolls have essentially shown up at one of the victim's house, one of the victim's homes, and their mother's home, and drove them into hiding, why would you want to put yourself out there and risk going through the same thing? That just doesn't make sense. Maybe they will later. It's their right to do so if they want to do so. But the fact that they don't come forward now does not mean they don't exist. Every single victim name, every one of them is very clearly listed in their documents. It's in the indictment, it's in this new document, every single victim, how old they are, the situations, where they're from, the years and the months that they were trafficked or exploited, how they were exploited, how they were recruited. It's all documented. So for the Tates to come out and say there's no names, there's no faces, the victims don't exist, they're bold-faced lying. Listen, nobody goes to court, nobody goes to trial with no victims. That doesn't happen. The Tates are telling people there's no victims because they're trying to push this false narrative to make them look like the victims. Okay, so I'm moving on here. And by the way, for those of you who are joining us, I have two things up in the nest right now. One of them, if you scroll over, is for how human trafficking victims are protected and how they're treated. And Romania has signed on to this international treaty. So they're not forcing victims to say that they're victims or anything like that. They're treating them with respect. They're giving them options. Anyone coming forward and say they're being forced to do something as a victim, those are those are propaganda videos. That's not how they treat victims of human trafficking. That's not even how Romania treats victims of human trafficking. Moving on here, because this is big news. So P. Diddy got indicted, and there's a reason why I added this to this space, because I've seen so many people say P. Diddy was denied bail, and P. Diddy, uh, they denied his bail because there was so much evidence against P. Diddy. Unlike the Tate brothers, who are essentially free to roam around Romania or under house arrest or judicial or whatever. And what people are trying to say is the Tates must be innocent because they're not in jail, but P. Diddy must be guilty because he was denied bail. Okay, it would take, if this is your thought process, if this is what you're thinking, it would take you probably less than 5 minutes to understand what bail is for and how bail is determined. Bail in the US and in any jurisdiction, it's determined on things like if you're a flight risk or not, or if you're a danger to the community, or if they think you're going to obstruct justice. Those are the things they look at when it comes to bail. And very specifically, when it comes to P. Diddy, it says the prosecutor says he posed a flight risk and was a danger to the community. And it goes on and says the prosecutors also allege that he used his power and resources to intimidate and silence victims and witnesses, raising concerns about possible witness tampering or obstruction of justice. That is why P. Diddy was denied bail. Has nothing to do with him being guilty or innocent. It's about him being a flight risk and a danger to the community. And they already have evidence that he intimidated and silenced victims and witnesses, which is obstruction of justice and witness tampering. It would take you 5 minutes to look this stuff up. Now, the Tate brothers in Romania, They don't have in Romania a bail system like you might have in the United States. What they have is a preventive measure system, and preventive measures can come in a couple of different forms. It can be what's called preventive detention, which means you sit in a jail cell for a period of time. It could be house arrest, or it could be what's called judicial control. Judicial control is the closest thing they have to bail. It's essentially you're allowed out of house arrest, you're not in jail, and you're given a freedom, you're given freedoms. The Tate's case, they're allowed, well, Tristan is now allowed to roam around Romania. He can't leave Romania. He has to check in physically with the local police every other day. He cannot contact victims, he cannot contact witnesses, can't have firearms, etc. So you have a set of rules imposed upon you, and you have to live under those rules. Where in the US, if you post bail, maybe you're posting, I think P. Diddy offered like $50 million or something as bail, and they declined it. Judicial control, there's no financial requirements. They do have a judicial control with bail, but that doesn't seem to be used that often. We tried digging into that. We don't find it that much. So Andrew is currently under house arrest for the next 30 days, and Tristan is under judicial control. Previous to the second case, they were both under judicial control since they were indicted of June 2023. But yeah, so back to P. Diddy and the preventive measures. So P. Diddy was denied bail because they thought he was a flight risk and danger to the community and to the victims and the witnesses. The Tate brothers, they were initially put under preventive detention. So they were in jail for 3 months when this first happened with the first case. It should have only been 2 months, but because they got caught breaking the rules in jail, and because there was a public smear campaign against their victims and some other incidents that happened, that extended their 3rd month. So they did spend some time in jail, and they're going to remain under some form of preventive measure in Romania for the duration of the trial. So now, currently, with the second case, this is where it gets really confusing. So Tristan is currently under judicial control. And Pax is in the audience. And if I get this wrong, Pax, please feel free to come up because this gets confusing. So there's 2 layers happening of preventive measures. And the way I'm understanding this is Tristan's judicial control carried over from the first case, and he remains under judicial control. But Andrew has a second layer of a preventive measure. So he's under judicial control while being under house arrest at the same time. I think that's how it works out. Incredibly confusing. So one of them has 2 layers of preventive measures, and one of them does not. So back to P. Diddy, the evidence is not on display here. It's about him being a flight risk and a danger. And the Tate brothers, the reason they're under a preventive measure, is because they're also they need to keep them inside Romania. They need to make sure that they don't evade justice. Andrew is specifically under house arrest for at least another 30 days, at the very least, because of the charge of sexual intercourse with a minor, which is a 15-year-old child. That's why they put him on house arrest, because they think that for the time being, at least for this particular phase of the continued investigation, that he is a danger to the investigation and a danger to her. Maybe he's going to try to intimidate her further. Maybe he's trying to obstruct justice. Whatever they think, they want to put him on house arrest because they believe he is a danger at this particular time, due to the seriousness of that charge of sexual intercourse with a minor who's 15 years old. And at the time that crime was committed, the age of consent in Romania was 16. So he's a bit cooked on that one. I just brought up somebody else. Oh, where did she go? I brought somebody else up and they left. Okay. So moving on here. So there's a lot of misconceptions about what human trafficking actually is, and that's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jan. Before I
Yeah,
get into
so
that.
I didn't want to interrupt this. If you want to continue, I just thought if you pause
No,
for a question, that was a good time. But
no, go ahead. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole here. So go ahead. Now would be the
sweet, let's
time.
go. So this is another thing from the Will space, right? So he said that the most credible claim, or the one that is most likely to sting Andrew Tate, could be the one with Vivian, right?
Mhm.
But he said, okay, how do they prove that she wasn't the one who created the account, right? Like, basically, how can they prove that he was involved in, putting her with an illegal age on a camping site?
He, so I understand. He is asking, or he's thinking that who created the campsite is going to be the responsible person.
Well, so on one hand, he said that the campsite should be held liable for allowing a 17-year-old on there, but I don't think that's how it works, because they probably followed whatever laws there are back then. And Tate bragged about how he has fake IDs in the past. No, I think the main claim that I would love to be able to address next time is that he said, like, how can it be proven that Tate is at fault for her being at an underage age doing cam work, right? Like
Oh, I
there must
understand.
be some
Yeah,
connection
okay.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, again, yeah, this is Will not understanding. Okay, so who created the account? It doesn't matter. But first of all, it's going to be Andrew who created the account. They created the accounts for all the girls. They controlled the phones. They controlled the passwords. They did all of that. However, that's not going to be what comes into play here. Okay. When it comes to trafficking, they're not looking to see, well, who created the account? All they have to prove when it comes to trafficking in minors, and if everybody wants to look up at the top and scroll over, you're going to see a chart. There's a 3-color chart. There's an action, a means, and a purpose. In order, and this is kind of the rabbit hole that we were getting ready to go down here. In order for human trafficking to exist, these 3 elements have to be present for someone who is 18 years old or older. That means you need an action or an act, which can be recruitment, transportation, transferring, harboring, receiving, or sheltering. There needs to be a means, which could be deception, fraud, coercion, threats of violence, abuse of power, taking advantage of someone's vulnerability. And there needs to be a purpose. And the purpose is always going to be some form of exploitation, slavery,
Uh,
forced labor.
can I intervene here a little bit? To be
Go ahead, please.
yeah, to be very clear, Andrew Tate was a greedy piece of shit, and all the bank transfers were done in his name. So they already collaborating with webcam sites, and
Yes.
definitely they know that the money from that account came in his bank account.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter who created it matter it mattered who cashes those money, because the one who cashes that money exploited that girl.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say that. So My Free Cams and OnlyFans are both creating or cooperating with DCOT. So there's no scenario where these guys are getting out of that. So back to the human trafficking chain up here. So you've got the purpose, which is always some form of sex or some sort of exploitation. In this case, it's commercial sex work. Now, if someone is under the age of 18, okay, the age of consent doesn't matter when it comes to human trafficking. So if the age of consent is 16 in a country, that doesn't mean you can traffic somebody within the age of consent, because of the protocol, the UN protocol, the international treaty, because of trafficking laws in Romania, anyone under the age of 18 is considered a trafficked minor, even if the age of consent is different. Okay. Now, so you've got the 3 columns: an action, a means, and a purpose. That's for anyone that's 18 or older. If they're under the age of 18, you only need an action and a purpose. So if you recruit someone for the purpose of commercial sex work, that's human trafficking if they're under the age of 18. But it goes a step further. If you only have the intent to traffic someone, you can still be prosecuted for human trafficking. So if you recruit someone, or if you just transport someone, or if you just shelter them, or you just harbor them, right? That's it. And your intent was to exploit them. Even if the exploitation does not take place, you can still be prosecuted for human trafficking. So it's the intent that matters, with or without the actual exploitation taking place. So let's say theoretically he recruited her and his intent was to sexually exploit her. Even if he didn't get around to sexually exploiting her, if they can prove that he had that intent, he'll be convicted for that. Now, back to your question, Jan, who created the account? It doesn't matter. He got paid. They've tracked the actual funds. She made $1.5 million for him, and they know that he took all of the money. They've been able to track that entire financial chain. And in terms of jurisdiction, I've seen a lot of people talking about jurisdiction. Well, how if she lived in the UK, how can they prosecute in Romania for something that happened in the UK when she started as a minor there? So there's extraterritorial laws. that can apply. And there's also the chain of human trafficking. So the fact that she eventually ended up in Romania, they follow the entire chain of trafficking. So wherever the crime actually started, where the chain of trafficking began, which I believe is in the UK, they can prosecute for the entire chain of human trafficking. So if she was 17 in the UK and then she eventually made it over to Romania, Kate's prosecuted for the entire chain. That's how that works. That's how they claim jurisdiction. So there's extraterritorial laws involved. There's the trafficking chain, and you've also got where the money ended up. Who got paid, who collected the money on that. So they've got jurisdiction, and all they have to prove in front of the court is that he intended to exploit her when she was a minor. And again, My Free Cams and OnlyFans, they were already cooperating with DCON on that one. So and they've confirmed her age. Both her home country and Romania have confirmed her age. She was 17 years old in 2014, which, if you remember that belt video where he beats her with a belt, when that initially came out, all of the press at that time who interviewed Tate, he said at that particular time that it was filmed in 2012. So if she was 17 in 2014, you can do the math and figure out how old she was in 2012. Thoughts? You put your hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to point out that there is very specific material out there of what they call on pornography sites boyfriend, girlfriend. And Skype does not do age verification. So if Tate decided to put the 17-year-old on a Skype video in a performative sexual act where they're nude, he has effectively trafficked her on a place where there is no age verification. So keep that in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a possibility that the sex video. I've been telling people to remove this if they've shared it. There's a possibility that the sex video of Vivian that's online, there's a possibility she's a minor in that video. High possibility she's a minor in that video. So if you're watching that video, you've downloaded that video, you technically could be in possession of child pornography. So just heads up on that one. And also, I want to state this. Just because we know the current charges with the Tate case, that doesn't mean that these are all the charges. So until now, until they're actually indicted, when the investigation ends, more charges could come. And we expect more charges to actually come. Now, when it comes to human trafficking, I already explained with the chart above how that works. An act, a means, and a purpose if you're 18 and older. If you're under 18, you just need an act and a purpose, or an intent for the purpose. And all of this is built on the UN Protocol for Human Trafficking. And the UN Protocol for Human Trafficking is it's an international treaty. 180 plus countries have signed on to this, and it's a foundation. It's a foundation for countries to build upon for human trafficking. And if you go through and you read it, when it explains, like, they have definitions of what human trafficking is, what exploitation is, and how they address consent. So you cannot give consent to be exploited. If you're in that situation because you've been deceived, coerced, forced in any way to be in that situation, you cannot consent to be exploited. So they address consent here. And they also say that this is at a minimum. They use the words at a minimum with this treaty. What that means is this is a foundation to build upon. So a country can take, if they've agreed upon the protocol, which over 180 countries have, they can use this as a foundation to build on top of, to build their own laws on top of, or integrate with their current laws to match the whatever problems they're having within that country. Pax, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I came here a little bit quickly because you are talking about why they are not in arrest, and you omitted to say something.
Yeah.
The fact that they are playing brave in the media, but if you look what they are talking in the front of the judge, all the time they are whining about their kids. Tristan is talking about all the time about her daughter, which has some issues, one of his daughters, and also they are using those daughters even when they want to take their cars back. They are using the daughters. Andrew Tate lied that he will never go in front of the judge and will say that he has health problems. When we look in the court documents, he tried to flee in Dubai, saying that he has cancer. So all the time when they are going in front of the judge, they are whining about their situation, about their kids, about so they are not as brave as they are pretending to be in the front of the judge. Then that is why I mean, when you have a trial which is taking years, you cannot keep them under arrest when they have kids and even one of their kids with issues.
Yeah, what Pax is talking about, we know what they're saying in court, and I've got this on my timeline. There's a website, it's a portal website, which is a court portal. You can probably find it if you go to my timeline and search portal. You can probably find it. It's like just.portal.ro or something like that, and you can search for their case, and you can see all the judicial decisions. So every time they go to court, and every time the judge says something or the brothers say something. There's also Rejust. Rejust is another website that I've got in my timeline where you can actually see what the Tate brothers are saying. So if the Tate brothers are in there and they're complaining about something, for example, Tristan went in one time, was complaining about it was unfair and the indictment had leaked online and it was ruining his public life. That's what Pax is talking about. So we can see what the brothers are actually saying in front of the judge and then compare it with what they're actually saying publicly. There's two different guys here. Like what you were seeing publicly, this is a complete front so they can keep the money coming in for the war room, for the real world, for the whatever coin they're pumping at the time to sell all their products. That's the public face that you're going to see. But what you're seeing in court and what they're saying to the judge is completely different. 100% different. Hey, David, welcome back.
Hey, how are you?
Great. What's
Well,
on your mind?
it's funny because the whole concept of OnlyFans, and don't want young women to go that way either, but the whole concept of it is to own their own content, and the fact that these people that are truly the Tates ignominious, the fact that they were finding people so naive and so just by their youth and what have you, to where they didn't understand that they could just privately own their own content, and they're basically inveigling them to these locations in the same way as the old porn industry used to do, because they get you down and then they make it difficult for you to get back to where you were before. you know Before even the convictions come down in whatever way, I I just want to make an overture. All men, because these are beta males pretending to be alpha males. I want everybody to know that these people are not, and the true disgusting nature of what they're doing is they're talking about themselves like they're manly because they're exploiting veritable children and people that are having a difficult time in their life or have made bad choices. And so I really appreciate the women who are outraged about this, but it's really the men's responsibility to roundly denounce this, and all across Europe and the US. These people have no place on any end of the spectrum where I can tell they're out there trying to find niches of people where they can gain some sympathy. They deserve no sympathy from anyone in any part of society.
Yep, I agree with every single word that you just said. And I also want to be very clear here that it's not illegal. And I see this argument all the time. Running a webcam business is not illegal. Running an OnlyFans business is not illegal. Having these accounts are not illegal unless you live in a country where it's illegal. But that's not what the Tate brothers are being accused of. They did not run a legal business entity in Romania. The documents show that they were not paying taxes. They did not have contracts. They did not have actual employees. DCOT has categorized. They've listed all of this stuff. They've investigated them thoroughly. You can't manipulate people to work in pornography. You can't deny them access to their finances on the account. You can't not give them the passwords to their own account. You can't impose unfair working hours. You can't put them in a house and forbid them to leave unless they have chaperones. Like there's all of these control mechanisms and these elements of fear where these women fear that they're going to be punished somehow, either financially or physically or emotionally, if they don't do what's requested of them. You can't do that to people. That's
Why
where
did they
human
go to
trafficking comes in.
Romania?
They went to Romania to exploit people because they wanted to live the life that they wanted to live. They wanted to live, and they've said it. They've said it on video. One reason he says, I'm not a rapist. He said, I'm not a rapist, but I want to be able to do what I want to do. And he also said that he wanted to take advantage of the corruption and take advantage of the society there. He thinks that corruption should be available to everyone. And Romania just happens to be the human trafficking and I believe the webcam capital of the world.
Oh, okay. See, I didn't know that backstory about Romania.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. There's
interesting.
some videos on them talking about why they went to Romania. You know, Romania's the webcam is a huge industry there. Unfortunately, so is human trafficking, and that's where they set up shop. Surprise, surprise. But there's a
Hmm.
right way to do pornography. There's a legal way. I mean, even if you're morally opposed to it, that's fine. That's another conversation. But there's a legal way to do it, and there's an illegal way to do it. And based on everything that we've seen, and based on Tate's own admissions through course material in his own videos, they chose the illegal way to do it through control mechanisms, through coercion, through manipulation, not giving people access to the finances, not giving them passwords to their own accounts. One of the courses, one of the things that they would teach these guys is when you would get these accounts, and they would even say to stop the girls from running away, you wouldn't give them their passwords. Like you can't do that. That's illegal. You can't stop someone from running away. If someone wants to quit, they should be able to quit whatever the job is without fear of retribution in any capacity.
Yeah, I think that's called slavery, actually.
Yeah, exactly. It's tied right into human trafficking. You got it. So I'm going to move a little bit quickly here. So Real American Heroes, you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. How you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Great, great, great. What's in your mind?
That's great. So, it's interesting because I'm a little bit younger, and I've been like following Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate for a very long time, for years, and I was a huge fan of his. Following it, I signed up to his Real World, followed his courses, and then I started seeing his like pimping hose degree and all this stuff. I'm not gonna lie, I fell down the rabbit hole, and I really found myself. You know what I mean? But then when I started like watching some of your videos and seeing some of your comments and stuff, I started realizing that there was like there was something dark about these two people that I only saw light about. What was crazy is that he has such a huge following, massive following, and it's like, do you think they're pure evil, which it sounds like they are, acting like good guys, like the whole beta pretending to be alpha, or do you think they're? I would like to know more about his like background, his younger self. Is he really damaged? Like, you know what I mean? So I think my question would be, why do you think he? Sorry, I'm kind of going down different thoughts, but why do you think he did this? Like, why? What do you think his motives were? Because I love to know more. Because he really gives me vibes of like a cult leader. Um, sorry, just I'm rambling now.
No,
No,
no, no.
interesting questions. Good questions.
Yeah, I agree with David. It's a fantastic question. And just let me start by saying this. I believe two things can be true at the same time. I think these guys, like if you join the real world, and I hope you got some sort of positive influence out of them. I think there are videos of them, and there are things that they say that I do agree with. Right? D- Go to the gym, take care of yourself, take responsibility, start a business, continue your education, whatever it is, like become a better man, whatever it is. Like I agree with that stuff. I don't think anybody agree with that stuff. But two things can be true at the same time. They can tell you guys to do that. They can even give you tools like the real world or whatever it is that they're trying to do, while at the same time live in a very dark life that people don't see. Right? This is how they made their millions of dollars. They made their first millions of dollars through pornography, through webcam. Both of them have said that. Decot has tracked down millions of dollars. Just two women alone, Vivian, the minor, who was 17 when she started, and another one of Andrew's girlfriends, they've tracked down just the two women alone. I think each of them was like 1.5 or 1.6 million dollars each. So you've got $3 million just on those two women, and there was another woman that made like $800,000, etc. And you have a whole bunch of women who didn't make hardly any money at all, hundreds of dollars, just hundreds of dollars. Some of them made a couple $1,000s, maybe $10,000. So it's a big spectrum there. And why did they do it? Money. They did it because they wanted to make money. Um, they both said that. Tristan said that he got addicted to the webcam industry. It was easy money. I think they got addicted to the lifestyle. They had all the girls around. We read through this new document where they have statements from the victims that talk about just lots of group sex happening almost every night with them and some of the girls. And a lot of the girls are saying we didn't want to do it, but we were forced into it, or we felt that there were going to be consequences if we didn't participate. So I think they just got sucked into that lifestyle. Um, David brought up, the porn industry, the main porn industry. And if you go back and if you read, or if you watch documentaries, or if you go down that rabbit hole about some of the stuff that happened in the porn industry, like in Los Angeles, like it gets dark there too. There's a lot of dark stuff around there, around, the sex industry. Psychologically, I think both of these men are completely broken. But, why did they do it? Greed, money. And the money came fast, the money came easy, and the sex was there, and all the girls were there. And they put together a system to where they could continue to do it. They could put the women in a situation to where they felt like they had to be part of the group sex. They had to go to work for them. They had to make their money, even if they gave 100% of their money to the brothers. So I think they got addicted to it. Tristan
And
said he got addicted
would
to it.
say that, C.S. Lewis said that we become more or less moral a little bit at a time every day. And I think just to his, by the way, I really liked his testimonial aspect of what he said when he was asking the question. He said, "I thought this way, and now the deeper reflection and seeing videos, I realize these are not good people." But I will say this though, I think that people weighed down into sociopathy, and I think that after, like you said, after they got addicted to the lifestyle, I think it denuded their capacity to feel anything whatsoever, any solicitude or kindness towards towards their victims.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And we see from these documents that they started targeting women with psychological traumas, women who were suffering from depression. There was a woman here who'd lost her mother. I think there were two of them, and their mother just died, and they were taking advantage of that vulnerability to try to weasel their way in to get control of the girl. One woman had just went through an abortion, so they were looking for vulnerable women, and because they knew they could control them easier. They knew that those women were vulnerable, and they put together a system to where they could exploit them. And that's why they're being prosecuted. So again, two things are true. They can be good, and they can be monsters at the same time. And I think if we dig through, a lot of the cult leaders and a lot of people who have done horrendous crimes, you could probably find that for a lot of those people. People saying, "Oh yeah, they were great guys. They were tons." Epstein did tons of charity work. Minus the whole sex trafficking with minors. People said that he was a great guy. You know, Yeah,
Yeah, I got
two,
you.
you know what I mean? There's two sides to the coin on that.
Sort of. Besides that, Miss Lincoln, how was the play?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So Real American, go ahead.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like I remember watching this video on the BBC about this guy called Iggy that was in the war room, supposedly. Apparently, he was like the head of the war room. And I remember watching a video of Tate saying that Iggy is a linguistic. So he was saying how you can speak in a certain way in a tone of voice with the right words to be able to convince somebody of something. And it was interesting is like how many people, especially some of my friends that I talk to, they know of the crimes, they know how bad they are, but they still defend them. There's like a level of brainwashing, and it's super interesting to think about because it's like it kind of reminds me of that one cult leader, like Jim Jones, the
Jim
People's
Jones. Yep.
Hmm.
Temple,
Yes.
Yep.
and how like I was sort of like Tay kind of led me down this rabbit hole looking at how all the cult leaders have similar personality traits with the charisma, the rich look, the charming, but then he's like leading a bunch of people like blinded basically. So like it definitely feels like a level of brainwashing, and it's trying to spot it and stop that from, because like I started listening to him in college. I ended up dropping out of college because of the whole Matrix thing. That this system is here designed to make me trapped and to turn me into a slave. So I started trying to follow him and stand to his real world instead. I'm not gonna lie, it kind of didn't really work out that well, if I'm being honest, because it's like drop shipping, e-commerce. It's very basic stuff, uh, and it just, yeah, I kind of feel lost in a way. It's weird. So I'm trying to find out where I went wrong following someone like that, and because his whole thing is like, I want my fans to win, I want my fans to do well, but then at the same time, there's so many videos of him like, I don't care about the people making losses with my webcam, like the men, I'm gonna take all their money, or like another video of him like, teaching people how to do the webcam stuff. He's like, oh, I teach them how to do it, but they're not gonna do it because they're losers. This whole thing, it's like, and why would you take it to that level? Like he could have gone to Dubai and probably laid low or something. What made him want this power and all these young men following him and devoted? It's like a control thing. I wonder if when he was younger he felt very controlled by his father, or there was this level of fear and he just became obsessed with control. Sorry, I know I'm throwing a lot at you.
No, 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 no. This is great conversation. Unfortunately, I don't have the answers to your question, but I do strongly believe that by the time this is over or shortly after, we're going to see some real in-depth documentaries and possibly some books coming out where these guys are psychologically evaluated. There's a lot of dark stuff going on, and I can say this, and Pax has seen some of these documents, and I know Common Sense Skeptic, who's in the audience right now, he's seen them too. Like the information that's been put out, like we've only put out a smidgen of it. We're trying to respect the process and try not to jeopardize anything. Like whatever you think you know about the case, you guys don't know the half of it. It's dark and it's ugly, and the more you dig, the dirtier and the uglier and the darker it gets. Yeah,
Uh,
I
but but
go ahead.
real, I would say to real though, I think I have more confidence in you than you do, because you clearly sound like that you've sort of had an awakening here, and I love hearing that. I think that the real, if people even have a presentiment that they're an alpha male, it means they're going to look out and protect women and not exploit them. But in a general civilizational sense, just applying this algebraically to everything, if you just look at people and ask yourself, are they leaving the people around them better for having a relation with them? Are they making them better? Are they a vulture asking the victims to dash beneath their wings because it's raining out? Are they, is the end result of their human relations where the people that with whom they've been associated are left better off, more independent, happier, better feeling on a good path? And that really, all of my heroes in civilization, and they're every spiritual leader of every religion, and people like Gandhi, whoever, all of them had that one trait in common. And I bet you real that you have people right in your real life. My big sister is one of those people, for instance, right in your real life that measure up to that. And it sounds to me like you have a sense of it yourself now.
Yeah,
100%. Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, it's interesting when watching him. I found myself when talking to people almost, this sounds wrong and I don't do this anymore, but I would kind of, you know, I would, because of the whole take control thing, if they did something I didn't like, I was pretty ruthless when pointing it out, or I wanted to kind of control them in a certain way. So I kind of felt myself leading, and I felt like when I was younger, I had a little bit of trauma and, from not being able to control certain things in my life. I won't go too deep into about that, but what's interesting is, yeah, I kind of like, because younger, I was super into comic books. I used to do jujitsu. I was pretty good at it, and I used to look up to heroes like Captain America. And then, when you look around the world and when the world gets tough, sometimes you start leaning down this villain path. And Tate was like a hero in my eyes. But then when you look further down the rabbit hole, he's a straight up villain. And he really is. It kind of reminds me of that movie Kick Ass, where like Kick Ass is like breaking down the door and he sees those pimps, And it's kind of like I kind of want to be like the guys from Kick-Ass, where I want to break the door down, and I want to stop the pimps, and I want to go back to this life of letting, just having fun, and you know what I mean, letting people do what they want to do, and if people want to be in my life, they can. If they don't have to, and just going back to relaxing and be myself again and forget about all this control crap, because it's super dark, and they clearly lacked a lot of guilt. And honestly, with all the stuff they've done, I really do hope one of these cases catch up to them. If it's the UK one, the Romanian one, whatever it is, they need to face justice for the things they've done. They are pimps. Like, making girls tattoo themselves of their names, classic pimp thing. You know, Tristan, a video of him saying he smashed up a girl's room. These are just classic fear mongering things. The fact I looked up to these guys shows that I got brainwashed. The fact that people look up to them, such a huge amount of guys now treating their girlfriends badly or trying to get multiple girls to be controlled. Yeah, these guys have really become these evil cult leaders, and it's good that they're being taken down, and I hope they do get exposed. And I'm sure the BBC aren't perfect, and I'm sure there is a bunch of corruption happening in the government, but that's a whole different rabbit hole to go down. But when it comes to these the two Tates, it's weird. It's like they're trying to expose the corruption, but at the same time they're doing really deep dark corruption. They completely contradict themselves on everything. It's like, how are you going to try and expose the Matrix and the corruption in the corporate media, but at the same time you're doing all this dark shit? It's like they got split personalities. That's why it'd be super interesting to learn more about their childhood and what made. It's like weird. It kind of reminds me of Homelander.
Oh man, I love that show. Absolutely love that show.
What is it? I've never seen it. I didn't.
The Boys. The Boys is kind of it's a dysfunctional superhero show.
Oh, is it on Netflix or?
I think it's on Amazon. You'll either love it or hate it. You're
Okay.
gonna love it or you're gonna hate it. It's one of those types of shows. It's weird.
Wait, that's
It's
every show for me. Well, I will
David.
say though, my fiance is making me watch things, and I do try to soldier through them as best I can. I think I got through two seasons of Gossip Girls.
Okay.
But listen, back to Rio. I really like the authenticity of your testimonial here, and I like the way you're saying that you had this. I don't know if you're still single. I tell you something, you're setting yourself up to meet the woman of your dreams, because it takes a real man just to make one happy. Not so.
Yeah,
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
I agree. Real. It sounds to me too. It sounds like you've got your head screwed on straight. I agree with everything David said. I wish you the best of luck, man. And feel free to come into our spaces anytime, or send me a DM or whatever to talk about this further.
100%. I'll
Yeah.
probably look back to going to college and basically just relapsing my life. I'm relapsing. Man, I gotta get better at English first. But just making the right path. It's time to look up to Captain America and not Andrew Tate.
There you go. There you go. One thing that David said, and respond to what you said. He was talking about how these guys might treat people in their life. And one of the things that Tristan has been complaining about is that he's making a public stink that the mothers of their children are added to the case as victims. And it should surprise no one here that the mothers of their children work for them in the sex industry. And there's one. I mean, we're going to get more information on all of them, but we do have information on one of them, who's the mother of one of Tristan's daughters. And one of the reasons why she's in the case as a victim, there's multiple, but one of the reasons which really stood out to me, because I think it shows how insidious they are. So there's a statement from the actual nanny, a helper who worked for them, and she said she was given instructions to not assist with the child. Don't be the nanny for the child. Don't give care to the child unless the mother made OnlyFans content. So they withdrew care for the child from the nanny unless she made pornography. Like, imagine doing that to the mother of your child or to your child. Like, that's like a whole nother level of twisted. And that's, to David's point when he brought that up, seeing things like that denying the mother of your child a nanny, and denying your child a nanny unless you make pornography. That adds, for me anyway. Like I remember reading that for the first time, and I was just like, "Holy shit!" Like, who does that?
One
Who
hundred
would?
percent. It kind of reminds me of it's crazy though because when going through a lot of these courses that I went through, he would always refer back to like Blitzkrieg. How did the Nazis take over? And he would always refer back to dictators. He was always talking about Genghis Khan and the ruthlessness. And there's like a video I watched of him saying he's James Bond because James Bond exploits girls for the code or whatever. And he was saying that like the things he has done to get into power, or the things he's done to get all this around him. He says, well, it isn't what you would think because it's like having a sword above your head, and at any time it can fall, and everything from your past can come back to bite you. Weird. It's weird because it's kind of like he has this like dictatorial behavior where he looks up to, in a way, it's like, I mean, you have to, if he's comparing himself to like how like the Nazis would take over, you got to be like Blitzkrieg. And he's using all these things. He's clearly studied history just in a bunch of times on podcasts. Always talks about Nazi Germany and history in World War II and Genghis Khan and all these ruthless guys. It's weird. It's like the way they justify their stuff. It must be they're trying to create this like dictator image and control the war room when it becomes so big. And yeah, it's
And think about this. Think about the fact that he would use Genghis Khan. When Genghis Khan was alive, there were 400 million people on the planet, and his body count was about 40 million. So he literally, the literal definition of the word, decimated human civilization, which makes him, by percentage, the greatest, most ruthless killer in human history. And the idea that someone would have, you know, that would be an inspiration for them says volumes.
Yeah, yeah,
They were saying that what a great guy is that Austrian. I don't know if you heard about that Austrian case with one guy who kept for about 20 years. He kept in the cellar his daughter, and he exploited her. And they were making jokes and about what a great guy is that piece of shit who raped his own daughter and kept her clothes in a cellar for 20 years.
yeah. I mean, he used to tweet praising the Taliban. He was talking about how good it would be, or how great it would be, to point guns at women and force them to have your children. Like, he said those thoughts out loud on the internet. Like, that's just crazy stuff. But yeah, I think when this is all over, I think we're going to see books and documentaries and psychological evaluations, and they're probably going to end up getting added to some, cult documentary. I truly believe there's a cult built around the Tate brothers.
Mm.
So it's
He was
disturbing.
wearing a Coney shirt. He was talking about
Yes.
Coney. This guy loves like the most evil people on this planet. The Coney thing as well. I was like, why is he wearing a shirt that says Coney and he's praising Coney? He says Coney is a G. He really. It's weird though because a lot of guys would see this evil stuff and be like, that's bad. But a lot of guys look at it and they still ignore it. It's scary to think such a large amount of guys would follow this guy. I mean, 10 million people following him on X. The fact that he's speaking to these guys' as dark desires, the money, the girls. It's great that it's coming back to bite him. Justice, karma. Um, but yeah, it's crazy how many people can fall into that trap, including myself. How you can just fall for someone who's charming, charismatic, and then he can slowly plant that seed in your mind. And the fact it's so easy for him to do is it's crazy. This thing needs to get studied and taught to people in schools because it's crazy how because even with like at a smaller level, I'm sure people are doing this at a smaller level, not as large as Tate. The characteristics of Tate, it's amongst a lot of people, but it's crazy that kid, like little kids. I saw a video of this kid doing his hand pose, and the teachers are talking to him, and he's like, "I don't need to talk to you," uh, you know what I mean? This like, it's crazy. It's absolutely insane. I'm
But
blown away.
I don't want us to learn the wrong lessons though, because I do believe that one of the things that inspires this level of misogyny is the fact that they are unable to relate to women at a very young age. I think that if I don't want men to become or boys to become weaker and more diffident with women, with girls their own age, let's say in high school. I want them to be able to walk up to them, initiate a conversation, engage with them, to feel some sort of connection, because I think these people deep down inside, I think from a young age, they they feel alienated from women, and they get sort of angry about that, and that's why they want to rig the game. It's funny because in sociopathy, one of the things around the exploitation of women is, or it's not funny in a really funny, but is that they want the woman to be more and more unconscious in some way. They want her agency to be debilitated or immobilized. So, for instance, get them drunk or uh, have them on drugs or have them in a compromising position. Well, what do all of these things have in common? They have in common the fact that an inconfident, weak person does these things. If you were just great with women and confident with them and like them, why, you would be able to go out and make a mutual exchange, a mutual advantage with someone fully in control of their agency. So I don't. I want young men to not get the wrong message. I don't want them to be weaker and more feckless with girls. We need to teach them how to behave as men.
100%. It's kind of like, um, yeah, like say if a guy like, I mean, in high school, I was always nice to people, and I had like one girlfriend, but like a lot of girls were very like mean to me. Like I got punched and slapped a couple of times, just ruthless girls. Um, and it was pretty crazy. What was crazy is like, yeah, like especially I remember watching this video of Tate on the show, and the girl was asking for some money. Like it was that Survivor show, and then Tate lied to her, saying he lost his money in the washing, just so he could keep it secretly and use it on a different group because he just didn't want to give it to the girl or whatever. And it's so true. It's like guys that are in high schools, especially with like some girls now. Can be quite ruthless with the whole TikTok thing and all this kind of stuff. And there are, and once if they get rejected by one girl, it's so crazy how they can grab that person, be like, oh yeah, that girl broke up with you, and then radicalize the hell out of you. And now from one little girl breaking up with you, you think she's this monster and all girls are bad and all this stuff, and you become super radicalized. And now you're in your basement with your Cheetos, smoking a cigar, shaving your head off, putting sunglasses on. You radicalize you just like that because he will say the right words in the right way and he will speak it into your brain, and then it will slowly rot away in your brain and it'll slowly destroy you because you become more evil. And it's crazy that Tate is so good at doing that, finding weaknesses and just targeting them that. But 100%, I do see a
Mhm.
lot of guys.
That's what they do. They're predators. They're predators who seek out people's vulnerabilities and they learn how to exploit those vulnerabilities. That's what they do. If it's young men or if it's women, that's what they do. They seek out people with various vulnerabilities and they exploit those vulnerabilities. That's exactly what they do. And those are the methods that they would teach people inside of the war room when they would buy their courses. The whole PhD stuff is and the workshopping inside of the war room, how they would workshop how to find weaknesses in these guys' girlfriends and how to exploit them in pornography, how to convince them, how to manipulate some guy's wife or girlfriend to get her to work on webcam or OnlyFans. Like that's what they do. Identify vulnerabilities and exploit those vulnerabilities. And now they have to face justice for doing it. Listen, I want to thank everybody for joining the space. I do have to shut this down. I was wanting to get into the lover boy tactics and go into all of that, but this conversation went a different direction. So we'll hold another space specifically discussing lover boy tactics and lover girl tactics, if such a thing exists. We'll hold that in another space. So, a real American, you can last thought. Go ahead.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I just wanted to say, I wanted to thank you so much because me discovering your page, if I didn't discover your page, I could have gone down a really dark rabbit hole. So the fact that I discovered your page and you showed me the light in a way, I really, really, really appreciate you. Absolutely. And yeah, I'm just super, super grateful that I came across your page and you helped show me a better way. So I really, really appreciate you.
Now, listen, man, it's a team effort putting all this stuff together, and I'm glad we've helped you in some way. And for the people who are listening and who give me a hard time and give us the entire team a hard time, and why are you spending your time? That's why. That right there. I don't know what real American hero's name really is, but that's one young man who has been put back on the right course. There's been a course correction. So that's why. Why do you do this? Why do you spend? There's lots of reasons why we do it, but that's one of them right there. So thank you, and I'm glad you're heading in the right direction now.
Thank you.
I wish
Thank you.
you the best of luck, man. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for the shares. Thanks for the comments, and we'll see you in the next space.